Holding an election in the middle of a global pandemic is a huge challenge, and there's a lot of misinformation going around about how voting could be affected, particularly because so many people will be submitting absentee ballots. We interviewed 2 election officials from Arizona and Florida to find out how they're rising to meet this challenge in order to make sure that all voters have a chance to make their voices heard this election season.
My name is Adrian. I'm the Maricopa County Recorder here in Maricopa County, Arizona.
I'm Mary Jane Arrington, and I work in elections. I am the Supervisor of Elections for Osceola County, Florida.
Our job is to make it easy for Maricopa County's voters to vote. And it doesn't matter who they're voting for. We just got to make sure that they understand how to get that done.
We are the conduit between a voter and democracy. Without us, elections couldn't happen.
This year's election is different from any other election we know in recent memory. This is a people business. This is a people contacting people business. And now we're in a world where we can't have that kind of contact regularly. And so there's a lot of challenges. But the great thing about that is our operation is very flexible and we're very nimble.
Because we're in a pandemic situation, we have seen more and more voters request mail ballots. So we've had to hire more people, get additional equipment, because we think that 50 to 60% of our voters are going to vote by mail.
So how does voting by mail work? How do you ensure this is a secure way for people to vote where only eligible voters can cast ballots? How can people be sure their ballots will remain private and that their votes will be counted?
So our ballot by mail system here in Maricopa County starts way before we actually do any printing of ballots. When a voter registers, we actually run their address through the residential address check to make sure that it is a valid residential address. We make sure that we run all of our voters through the National Change of Address database, and then before the election happens, we send out a 90-day notice. So we've got several processes for validating which addresses we're going to send ballots to before we even print them up. Then once we print them, they've got smart barcodes that we worked with the United States Postal Service to take care of. Those ballots are all tracked, not just on the way out to the voters, but then we track them when we receive them back from the voters here at Maricopa County. And so just the transportation of the ballot is a pretty rigorous system.
Well, first of all, in the state of Florida, when you vote by mail, we send you a secrecy sleeve to put your ballot in. And once that ballot is removed from the envelope, it becomes separated from any identifying factor that would associate that ballot with you. One of the biggest concerns with voters voting with mail ballots is when they make a mistake. And we are fortunate in Florida, voters are allowed to correct that mistake, and we call that curing. The number one mistake voters make is they become excited, I think, and want to get it back to us quickly, and they forget to sign the back of the envelope. And we match your signature on the back of that envelope with the signature we have on file for you. So if you don't sign it, then you need to cure that.
So we've been hearing that lots more people are requesting mail ballots this year. How many people do you expect to vote by mail in this election? And if there are too many, could that cause problems?
So Maricopa County is really, really big, but we've been sending lots of ballots out to folks for a long, long time. We're up to over 78% of our 2.5 million active voters on the permanent early vote list. So we'll be printing more than 1.9 million ballots to be sent out in the mail just right here in Maricopa County alone. In order to deal with the increased volume of early voting that we have in 2020, what we've done is really streamlined a lot of our processes. We learned a lot of lessons from our March presidential preference election through the primary election that we have in August, and we're going to apply those lessons in November.
I think once voters start to vote by mail, most of them really like it. And we have seen since 2014, every election, the number of mail ballots we process keeps increasing. It has become the most popular way in Osceola County to vote. In the primary we had in August, 64% of our voters voted by mail.
With so many people voting by mail, when will we know the results of the election? Will we be able to find out who won on election night?
So tabulating ballots is one thing, but reporting out the results is an important process that cannot happen instantaneously. Let me explain why. There's 3 different buckets that we have of election results. The first bucket is the early vote bucket. Now in Arizona, we report those numbers out at 8 p.m. on election night. Those votes are the early ballots that we've processed up to 2 weeks ahead of election day. Then as the evening goes on, we get into bucket number 2. Bucket number 2 is all the in-person voters from election day. And once we get all of those in, that's all of the election night reporting that we will do. But there's another bucket, that third bucket. These are voters who brought their absentee ballots and turned them in on election day. Remember, we've got to signature verify and process every single one of those ballots so that we can then tabulate. And we are never done with results on election night. That's something that the media likes to tell folks, and they make their declarations and all their prognostications. But it isn't until we're done counting and we canvass our election that we actually know who really won any of these contests.
If you had one message for voters this fall, what would it be?
Vote early. Your elections administrators really want to make sure that they get everything right, that they're not under too much pressure towards the end, so that they can serve you. And in case there's any issues, it just makes sense to get in early, vote early, and make sure to help those folks who are just citizens like you and your neighbors.
There's a lot of misinformation out there that voters are getting, and we spend a lot of our time trying to combat, the misinformation. And I would encourage voters, if you're in doubt, call your elections office and ask them if you have a concern. Don't get your information from your neighbor or from some social media site or something. Go to the source, and I'm sure they're going to give you straightforward information that'll be more accurate.